This week on the show, my friend Joseph Dinesh, JD, to unpack, first of all, his amazing conversion story, his journey kind of into Protestant Christianity, and then out again, drawn into the Catholic faith in some unlikely circumstances, is an amazing story, first of all. And then his mission of unpacking, explaining some of the misconceptions that Protestants have about Catholicism, just easily, charitably, kindly unpacking those issues and explaining, hey, here's what we really believe. He tackles former Catholics, these misconceptions that Protestants have, and all kinds of things, from sola scriptura to hell to the nature of God and the saints and everything in between. And we discussed that this week on the show. It's a phenomenal episode. I think you'll love it. Please watch and enjoy. Hey friends, welcome to the show. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you're listening on podcasts, please follow the show where you find it. And if you're on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts, please leave a rating or review. Those ratings and reviews help push the podcast out to new people. And thank you for listening. If you're watching on YouTube, hey, thanks for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe to our channel. Do all those kind of things you do. Interact below, guys. Leave some notes. Share these conversations with people that you think might like to hear them. Watch them, and thank you for tuning in, guys. Appreciate you very much. An awesome conversation in store for us this week. I am joined by Joseph Dinesh, JD. He is a Catholic YouTuber who has amassed an amazing following, doing some fantastic Catholic apologetics videos. He has an awesome story of his own faith journey. We're going to unpack that and get into some of those things that are constantly coming up in Protestant Catholic dialogues as well in this episode. It's awesome. JD, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here. And
thank you,
hello.
Keith. Hello. Yeah. And I'm talking from the future, as you said.
Yes.
Sydney, Australia.
I think that's fantastic. We've had some fantastic guests, some strange time zones, but never before have I spoken to somebody who is like a full day ahead in the future in Australia.
Yes.
So that's mind blowing and fantastic. Any insights you can share from the future, JD, might also be pretty
future is awesome.
That's good. That's good to know. Nothing, no big surprises yet. Okay.
No.
Okay. I like that.
Yeah.
I guess you'd be the first to know, though, if our Lord returned, right? You'd be the guy that would find out first.
Yes. I'll let all you guys know in the West.
I have to get your number so you can give me a quick call. Say, hey, by the way, in 13 hours, this is that's amazing.
Yeah.
Not quite how it works, I don't think. Listen, this is a great place for you to come in. So thank you for being here, because you are doing some fantastic work on YouTube, on Instagram, on social platforms, really honing in on some of those questions that Protestants have about the Catholic faith, common critiques, common misunderstandings. That's the bread and butter, of this show. I really launched this thing when I had my own conversion experience from an evangelical to Catholic, and realized that what so much of my misunderstanding or my confusion of what Catholics believed was based on those just simple misconceptions, those things that were really easy to unpack once I did the research to unpack those things. So I love that you make that so easy for viewers to see, to find your content and to go, yeah, you know what? I had these misconceptions. Here's a guy in like 2 minutes that just has demolished those misconceptions with just logic and kindness and charity. I love that you give people no excuse for holding on to those misconceptions anymore, JD. I think that's awesome. And you yourself have a conversion journey. So I think what I'll do is I will get out of the way. You can kind of just tell us about, your origin story, where you came from, that your experience, and then we'll dig into some of those misconceptions afterwards. But I'm curious, because you are on fire for teaching the Catholic faith in the heart of the church, and I'm curious if those misconceptions figured into your maybe drifting away or your own confusion, but maybe not. But I'm curious to hear either way. Your journey, Joseph. So I'll get out of the way and let you unpack kind of your faith experience. Where does it begin?
So I come from a third generation Catholic family. As you might know, my family got evangelized when the Britishers came to India, maybe in the 19th or the 20th century. So my grandfather became a Protestant because the Britishers brought in Anglican the faith. And then because there was the only church in the village that he was living in was a Catholic church, my father was baptized into the Catholic faith, and that's how I became a Catholic.
Wow.
So it's kind of mysterious how God would pick someone from a third generation Catholic family to do have a calling like this for me to do this online. So that always amazes me. God always does not call the qualified, but he qualifies the called.
Yeah.
So that has been inspiring for me. So I come from a dysfunctional family in the sense that my parents were fighting all the time. So my character formation took a big hit. So then you can imagine what kind of spiritual formation I would have had. It was absolutely nil. So I finished my schooling, and then when I was about to go to college, there was this Protestant college which was very famous in the city that I was living in. So for the marks that I got, that was the only college I was getting. So that's how I got introduced to Protestantism. And because I had no Catholic formation, my Catholic friends brainwashed me like this in a second. The questions that they asked, I did not have any answer. And because all my friends were Protestants and I was spending time with them, going for their prayer groups, I just eventually became a Protestant just overnight. And I started embracing their teachings, the way they looked at God, the way they looked at life and all that. And by the time I came out of college, I was as fundamental as you can get as a Protestant. In fact, I remember an incident where I went to the Catholic church. I asked the priest if I can go to the pulpit and tell all the people gathered for the mass that they are all idol worshippers, and they kicked me out of the church campus. So that's how radical I was.
Wow. Yeah. so that's amazing. That's like. And you weren't, gosh, I don't want to interrupt you in your story, but you weren't necessarily somebody who is just anti-Catholic for the sake of it. You really, you believe that what you would do at that pulpit was to save those people out of what they were doing that was terribly wrong, right? That's like you were seriously convicted, not just to troll people or to be annoying on some Instagram comm box, but you really believe like that this so firmly that the Catholic Church was an idol worshiping thing that you thought, that's bold and brave, and obviously really committed to the cause.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Yeah. So I was kind of very passionate, and at the same time I picked up music when I was in this Protestant college. As you know, every Protestant plays music because they use that as a tool, as a channel to evangelize.
Yeah.
So I in this Protestant college, and every guy is playing some instrument or the other, and I did not have anything to impress girls. So I wanted to pick up the talent of playing the music. So I became a good musician by the time I came out of college. And so when I came back to the city, as you know, the Protestant churches are filled with musicians. So for me as a newcomer to get opportunity to play in a Protestant church is very difficult. So then there was a Catholic parish which was very much in need of a keyboardist for the church choir. And that's how my re-entry into the Catholic faith happened. Very begrudgingly, I said, okay, I'll take care of this choir. And then slowly my journey started from there. Do you want me to continue?
Wow. I do. That's really interesting. Now, those really. So you went from those really anti-Catholic prejudices, though, that you would go into the church to evangelize and tell the people from the pulpit that they were all wrong. What changed that? They just kind of needed the money. Like the keyword in the Catholic Church. What shifted there that was like, well, okay, I can do that.
So for me, it was not an intellectual assent as for a lot of people have. Oh, I had these objections against the Catholic faith, and now I have intellectually understood what the church teaches, and that is why I became a Catholic. It was not like that. For me, it was more of an emotional assent initially, because I remember playing for adoration. In a retreat, and there was pin drop silence. There were like 1,000 people gathered for that adoration service, and I could not hear it was pin drop silence, and I felt something that I never felt before during that adoration. And so my reversion started there, slowly experiencing the sacraments one by one, and then I started going for daily mass. But still, heart of heart, I was still a Protestant. I was just doing this because this was the only church that was nearby my house, and and I had gathered a group of friends who were all Catholics at that time. So I was just doing it, but in my heart, intellectually, I still had those questions against the Catholic faith.
Yeah. So you obviously began to. That's again fascinating. Like the journey so far is very fascinating. That really, this is all the other churches, they had musicians. This one didn't, and it was the Catholic
Yeah.
Church, right? So there are churches, there's lots of them, but they're further away. This one's closer, right? And of course, we began to get involved and began to make friends in that church and meet people who maybe aren't idol worshipers who you once kind of thought, and begin to unpack that. That's amazing. So how did you begin to satisfy these questions that you had then still?
So at that time, we always have these unhealed wounds that we develop as a child, based with a relationship with our parents, our friends, our relatives. So that wounds always linger in your heart. So after I came back to the Catholic Church, the questions that my Protestant friends asked me was, still I was still battling it. Why should we worship Mother Mary? Why should we have the statues? Why should why should there be a priest intermediating between me and God? Why can't I directly talk to God? All those questions were really troubling me. And at that moment, I got swayed with all these pro-life issues, NFP issues. Even though I was not married at that time, I was telling married couple what is NFP, what is being pro-life, how to chart your cycles and all that. And that is when I realized, as a Protestant, I was on zeal to do whatever I want to do for God. But then I slowly realized, in retrospect, as I look at it now, spiritual maturity is not you doing whatever you want to do for God, but rather allowing God to do what he wants to do through you. So that maturity I did not have at that time. And I was just getting into so many stuff, thinking that, oh, now I'm embracing the Catholic faith. Now I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I'm, propagating pro-life issues, propagating NFP, working for the, strong bond between married couples. But then it had a very hard backlash, because I was not prepared. I was not ready to do ministry in that particular area, because, as you know, marriage is a stronghold of the devil. And if you are not going to be spiritually strong and you're going to do all these kind of stuff, the backlash is going to be very strong. So I had a miserable, horrible time. Even though I was doing ministry. Slowly I got addicted to pornography during the time I was doing this ministry, and then I fell into depression. Then some kind of affliction took over me, and for 1 year I struggled with all those things. As I was journeying closer to the Catholic faith, because I did things that God did not want me to do, and I was not ready, it just took me on a roller coaster. So it is at that point that my reversion to the Catholic faith started. When I was, deep down, as they say, dig for treasure where you fall down.
That's fantastic. And you're right. I don't remember which saint, maybe you might know this, but there's a famous quotation from one of the fantastic saints. And the idea is this, right? That if you're not being tempted by these things, right, you're not doing the right thing. Like, the devil is going to tempt you when you're on the right path towards holiness, when you're in the ministry doing things that God kind of wants you to do. That's when those temptations will come, right? And we need Christ to help us through that. If you're smooth sailing and nothing is ever going wrong, perhaps it's a little too smooth because you're making it a bit too easy for yourself. You're not doing those hard things, maybe, right? And that wouldn't always apply for every person every season, right? But I think it's an interesting reflection that when you're beginning to do those things, those temptations are surely going to come, right? That are meant to drag you back because you're on the right track, right?
And the greatest temptation I felt was that I thought I was in control. I am going to do the things for God. I'm going to tell what I'm going to do for God. Like in the Old Testament, in 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel, we always see that King David, whenever he was victorious in the war and the battle he was going to, he always checked with God. God, what do you want me to do? He did not go act as if he's the king of the world and do whatever he wanted to do. So that, I feel, was some Protestant remnants that I had in me, that I thought I was in control and I am dictating things to God. So that's what I think, made me fall, so hard. And after that, I realized, okay, now whatever God tells me is what I'm going to do.
Yeah. It's and that's the true abandonment, right? The abandonment to God's will. And when you're at your deepest, right, like you say, that's different kind of surrender than saying, okay, I have these questions I'm working through intellectually. I'm working through those. I'm sharing this cool stuff with people in this ministry, right? But I like that it's when you're down at your deepest like that, right? That's when you have almost nothing left to give, but just surrender and say, okay, Lord, like, take me, right?
Yeah, because you feel that you're doing so many things for God and you are doing it with such good intention, but then you're becoming miserable. And that's when I thought, okay, even though I'm doing good things, but I'm not doing the things that God wants me to do. That is why it's all turning out like this. And so, as I told you, I was addicted to pornography. I was afflicted, and I was in deep depression. So at that time, there was heavy flood in the city that I was living in, and I just could not tolerate the fact that I have to be put in four walls, struggling through all the three things that I mentioned. So I went to a HIV care home where Catholic fathers take care of HIV affected children, like for no mistake of their own. And they were, inviting volunteers from all around the world. And, I thought I'll also go help them with music and whatever way I can. So once I went there, I had no mobile, nothing. And that is when I discovered my humanity by giving myself to all those children, because as you know, the law of the gift, as St. Pope John Paul II said, you increase in the measure that you give it away. So I was just giving my time, my emotion, my talent to these children, and slowly I started regaining my humanity, and I was able to see God working in me. And the miraculous thing that happened at that time was I was introduced to Bishop Barron's videos, and he was just starting out at that time, and he was putting out the usual questions that Catholics have about their own faith and what Protestant accusation is about the Catholic faith. And I was just kind of going through all the videos, and slowly I was saying, initially it was an emotional ascent for me. Now I was intellectually ascending towards the beauty of the Catholic faith, to the truth and the goodness. So my journey started there. And as you know, when you have an encounter with God, it is of course for your own sanctification. But God does not say, oh, now you are sanctified, now you have a relationship with me, so now you can do your own stuff. But the moment you have an encounter, you are sent on mission. There is no biblical character, nobody in the Bible who had an encounter with God and was not sent on mission. Whether it's Peter, Paul, Mother Mary, even Mother Mary, when Angel Gabriel told her role in the theodrama, the next passage said she hastily went to meet her cousin Elizabeth, immediately on mission. So after I had the encounter with God, there was this relentless calling in my heart. Okay, I need to do something in social media, because I drew inspiration from Bishop Barron. If I can be touched and transformed by his videos, how much more can the work that someone else does, especially in the Indian context, can really help the Indian Catholic audience? So immediately I was sent on mission, and through the mission is how I was sanctified. A lot of people ask me, how did you overcome pornography? How did you do this and do that? So I always say, I did not overcome pornography. Pornography left me as the mission engulfed me.
Yeah, that's good.
Because a lot of people live as if, a lot of us live as if we are living to overcome sin, to stay out of jail. Our life is all about staying out of jail. But that's not our life. Our life is to be who God meant us to be. And then we'll set the world on fire. And that fire that we are set on will burn out all the sins and attachments that we have, and it will all flee, as the Bible says, right? Resist the devil and it will flee. So for me, I was so clinically addicted to pornography that within 3 months I was a new person. I don't know how pornography left me. It just left me.
That's fantastic, and I love that vision of that burning fire. Right, you follow God, right, relentlessly, like that kind of abandonment, right, and of course that lovely quote, right, that fire sets the world on fire, but also burns away those things that are holding you back. Right, It's such a beautiful image, and I think you're entirely right. And I think about how that translates to the person who's becoming Catholic. When I teach RCIA, the course for people who are becoming Catholic, right, out of other Christian traditions, the one thing we always emphasize is, okay, well, now what? How can we plug you in somewhere, right? Because the way that you live out your faith and, conquer or let sin, burn away is to get involved in things and begin really practicing that faith, right? Whether it's teaching or evangelizing or sharing or or volunteering your time, right?
Yes.
And you've given us some amazing examples of ways that in your life that worked, right?
Yeah.
But those are the ways you get plugged into that community and become transformed, right? And those sins, like they don't, like you say, become overcome. They kind of become, well, that's not important to me anymore because I am living in abandonment to Christ, and this is my mission. And that joy, that purpose, that passion, that grace, that love for Jesus just overwhelms the other stuff, right? Does that make sense?
Actually, you can sense if someone is really transformed based on this one litmus test. Have they just stopped doing the bad things, or have they started doing the good things? A lot of people have, they say they went for the retreat, they have an encounter with God, and I have stopped doing this. Okay, fine. But what have you started? What good thing have you started? That is what, kind of indicates the transformation that we have with Christ, because you see that in the life of the saints, we see that in the life of the apostles, and even in St. Paul. St. Paul just did not stop murdering Christians all over Israel, but he started evangelizing and became the apostle of the Gentiles. That is why we call him a saint. He was transformed completely. So it's very important when we have our journey with God, not to just stop doing the bad things that we were doing once, but it's important to start doing the good things. It is the good that we start doing will displace the evil that is in our life.
Amen. Preach it, brother. That's fantastic. And of course, you're right? Like, and that sounds so obvious when you say it like this, but of course, that's super important. And I hadn't really thought of that before until you just said that, right? That people aren't saints for things they just didn't do, right? They're saints for things they did, right? That's a fundamental difference, right? And I think one of those kind of misunderstandings with the Catholic faith, right? And we can get into more of these, but okay, the Catholic faith has all these rules of things you shouldn't do, right? That's one of those things that you often hear people talking about when they describe Catholicism, right? Oh, no, I'm an evangelical Christian. We're all about Jesus, like me and Jesus. Those Catholics just have rules things they just can't do, right? But of course, that's not the point of the Catholic faith. That doesn't make saints just not doing stuff. It's the things that we do, right? I think that's very well said. That's an amazing way of looking at that.
Which is why the Catholic Church disagrees with our Protestant friends on the fact that they think our spiritual journey is just about our relationship with God. It's just you and God. No, the two commandments that God gave: love God and love your neighbor. So it's always interconnected. So someone who says it's all about their relationship with God but does not is bothered about the neighbor, you can say, okay, they are really not embraced the Christian faith in its fullness. So that's also a very good litmus test. And why I speak very strongly about the calling and the mission and the vocation that God has for our life. The American philosopher Mark Twain once said the two most important days of your life are the day when you're born and the day you find out why. So most of the time we lose our identity and we just live a sinful life because we have not been embraced and engulfed with this purpose, this calling, and this vocation that God has for each and every one of us. You see in the life of St. Peter, St. Paul, and Mother Mary, they were lit up. They were lit as soon as they knew their vocation in their life. So it's very important to understand that each and everyone has a purpose, and the most important thing that you have to do is to find out what that purpose is. Once you do that, half the battle is won.
That's fantastic. Well, how do they do that, JD? What would you? Because you, and I think this is brilliant. Their trajectory here, right? The videos. The Bishop Barron's work that kind of brought you into intellectually understanding the Catholic faith. Yeah, you felt a calling to I can do this for a whole other audience, and I can do this that's my gifting. You found that. Recommendations for the person who's like, okay, I'm a new Catholic, JD. How do I find that calling in my life? Right?
Yeah. So what three things that I did, Keith, was the fact I made sure that I did Holy Hour every day, 1 hour before the Blessed Sacrament, because at this point, after this volunteership that I was doing in this HIV care home, I came back to my city and I was not working at that time, even though I'm a marketing graduate and I could have taken any job. And every time I applied for a job, I was constantly being rejected, even though my qualification was good. So I knew God was telling me something and that I had to do.
Yeah.
So I used to sit before the Blessed Sacrament every day, 1 hour. I went for daily mass, and then most importantly, I had discerned someone to be my spiritual director. So I think these three pillars really was calming my heart to hear what God was telling. And eventually I found out that this is what God wanted me to do. So it is sometimes, it's so difficult to hear God's voice and what he's trying to tell us and what purpose he has for us in the cacophony of sounds that we hear in our culture and in this world. So if somebody is discerning to know what God is really calling them to do, I would suggest Blessed Sacrament, how much ever time you can afford with the availability you have, daily mass, visit the sacraments, and find a spiritual director. Even for the canonization of saint, there is a devil's advocate. You need a devil's advocate to tell you exactly where the devil is attacking you. So it's very important to have a spiritual director. To what I was 6 years back and to what I am today, as much as I appreciate the spiritual formation that I've had intellectually in understanding the faith, a lot of character formation has happened. Because if I just had the spiritual formation today, I would not be able to do what I'm doing, in terms of my ministry, without the character formation. I would have been burnt out within no time. So I feel those three things are very important if someone is discerning their vocation in their life.
That's wonderful. That's fantastic advice. Okay, so your journey kind of ends here with you launching this ministry. Yes. Is there more to say there? Is there more to that journey, or should we just dig into some of the things that you've created in that ministry?
So in 2016, I started the channel, and I called my spiritual director 2 or 3 times, and I was telling him that I feel that I need to start a YouTube channel. God is calling me, and the third, and I was just very hesitant because I did not have any money at that time, since I was not working, and I had to invest in the camera, the mic, and all that. And I was just thinking, why would God call me at this point in my life where I have no job, no way to financially support whatever I am supposed to do? It would be much better if I have a job and I do this part-time. And that was my reasoning. And so I didn't hesitate starting the channel. And then I called my spiritual director and I asked him, do you really think I should do this? And he said, what are you waiting for? I just kept the call, went to the shop, bought the camera and the mic, and I did my first video. Sometimes when God calls you and he tells you clearly what you need to do, you better do it before it's late.
That's fantastic. That is definitely adhering to that calling very immediately. Okay, we're done. I'll go. And that's great. And that also just goes to show the importance of somebody in your life, like a spiritual director.
Yes,
get to objectively, give you those kind of advice, right? We can him and haw. I mean, you probably could have prayed for hours, days, weeks.
Yes.
By yourself with God, trying to discern that. Here's the guy that goes, no, just go do this. And okay, like that third party, that person outside of yourself to give you that advice. I think that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
So you sat down and began to do these videos. Was there things in your heart that like, I got to do this and this and this? Like, was there a direction right away in how you wanted to reach people?
When I started, I just knew that God wanted me to do something regarding the Catholic faith in terms of social media. But I would say I was very distracted at that time because I was seeing so many people do so many things on YouTube. And whenever I saw somebody do a music video, I wanted to do a music video. Some apologetic video I see, I want to do apologetic. Some interview, then I wanted to do an interview. So at that time, it was very scattered, like how Jesus told Martha, you're worried about so many things, and he told Mary, you have found the one thing necessary in your life. So it took some time for me to have that spiritual discipline in terms of focusing on one thing that God is calling me to do. And I think it took 6 years of formation. And to answer your question, initially I did not have a clear direction of what I wanted to do. I just had the big picture. The micro aspects fell into place and God slowly formed me. So I would say right now I am in a good place in terms of doing what God is actually asking me to do.
Yeah. And you do these really brilliant kind of questions that Protestants have with the Catholic faith, or misconceptions they come with to the Catholic faith. And I mentioned to you before, right? This is the kind of thing that, as I was discerning my spiritual path and looking into the Catholic faith, I came with all these different misconceptions that were really based on things I'd heard from a friend of a friend, or I'd picked up from, a pastor over here. And I wasn't like I was raised in an anti-Catholic environment. I wasn't going to the Catholic Church to go to the pulpit and to address the congregation with how they were wrong. It was, and I think it is in many cases, in places in the world, just kind of in the air you breathe. Like it's just it's not even a thing you acknowledge or say, yeah, I'm anti-Catholic. It's, well, when we use this sermon over here, talked about the Pharisees, well, those are the Catholics. Like, we talked about, not worshiping idols. Well, the Catholics do that, right? It wasn't really ever explicitly like condemning Catholics. It was just in the background is this thing called the Catholic Church. And we just know that they're doing the wrong thing because they don't look like us. They don't believe what we believe. They're just wrong, right? And then you inherit all that goes with that, right? So the work that you do in dispelling, sometimes very simply, sometimes, you have a little graphic that's a Protestant and your response, and it's like, yeah, okay, that was really easy to dispel that misunderstanding, because sometimes it is really easy. It's just a simple like confusion that no, you're just wrong. Here's what we actually believe, right?
Like Bishop Fulton Sheen said that, there are 1,000 people who hate the Catholic Church, but very few actually hate it for what the church actually teaches. So I felt, because I had this intellectual ascent after watching the Bishop Barron videos, and it was such a beautiful journey of, convincing yourself of the things that you questioned once or you were not convinced before. It is such a beautiful journey to know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And it is just not about kind of debunking our Protestant friends, but truth will actually set you free. So we are going to talk about the mis teachings of our Protestant friends online and otherwise. And I believed in all those things, and it really led me on a wrong path. And somebody out there might have a wrong idea about God, wrong idea about life, and could really mislead them, and it can have a negative consequence in their life. So because I've had all those things, that's why I feel very passionately. Like one example I'll give you is I liked a girl in college, and my Protestant preachers, everybody, we used to have regular prayer groups, and everybody who came there and said, if you really love this girl, claim the Bible verses, every day pray for 1 hour, and God will give you this girl, and you will be married, and you will have a child. I really believed that. So every day morning I prayed, I claimed the Bible verses, and after college she went to her place, and I came back, and it all ended abruptly. And that is when I started questioning, how can this happen? They told me that it's going to happen, and I claimed Bible verses. I trusted God. I had faith in God, but it still did not happen. So then I was really, shaken in my faith, and I thought, okay, all this thing about God giving you what you want is not at all true. So why I'm telling all this is the negative and the bad understanding of God and prayer can really lead you on a wrong path, and it can really shatter your spiritual journey. So it's very important that we embrace the truth in its fullness. Otherwise, it can have negative consequence on your life.
Yeah. And I love that you say it's not just about debunking these Protestant myths and misunderstandings. It's about showing that fullness of truth. That's so important, because there's guys out there, right? And I meet them on YouTube and on Instagram all the time, right? Whose goal in life is just to debunk, or criticize things that Catholics say, or to debunk things that Protestants say. And that's the end game. That's the sum total. What they want to do is just to be right. I want to show how you're wrong and how we're right. I can remember that I made a video a while back that just talked about Ignatius of Antioch, where he talks about in the early church father, learned from the feet of the apostles, very early. And he talks about how the true Christians in his day were the ones who had a bishop and who professed that the flesh of, in the Eucharist was the flesh that hung on the cross, like they believed in the real presence of Jesus. And I said that in the video, and I got some flack, some backlash from people saying, "Oh, you don't believe that we're real Christians because we don't believe that as evangelicals." And I kind of went, no, that's Ignatius of Antioch saying that. I'm just bringing to light things that I discovered when I was reading the Church Fathers, and I kind of went, "Whoa, that's kind of crazy." I'm not here to prove you wrong and say I'm right, you're wrong. Look, you guys don't believe in the real presence, so you're all wrong. Right? That's Ignatius saying that. I'm just bringing that out to bring that to light, right? Not to criticize, not to say, hey, I'm right, you're wrong, right? Just to bring that forward to lend some understanding here, right? If the end goal for anyone, I think, is just to win an argument, which in many cases, in many places out there, that's just the end goal for Catholic and Protestant apologists. That's not going to be. I mean, it might bring some fruit, right? But it's not going to be a place that God's going to really, do good work, right? Work through in a real way. Whereas if the purpose is, God wants me to shed some light here and bring the fullness of truth here, that's a very different perspective in the ministry, I think, right?
Yeah, and having an respectful argument with our Protestant friends is one of the best things that we can do to bring out the fullness of truth about the Catholic faith. Because Bishop Barron always says we always think there are only two options when we think about religion. Either we completely be indifferent to the misunderstandings or the disagreements that we have with each other, or go to absolute violence, being uncharitable and unloving to our Protestant friends. But I think there is a middle ground, which is a respectful conversation, like how St. Thomas Aquinas had when he was living, how our, the different councils that we have had in the church, to really discuss, argue, and take the argument to its, fullest end. And at the end of it, you're still not convinced, okay, fine, we can respectfully disagree. But to have that argument in itself is the sanctifying process, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like how you could just leave it, right? You so many times we got to argue till the death, right? We have to get to a result. You got to change your mind. I got to change my mind. No, I mean, that's, first of all, I've learned this, and you probably, I'm sure, know this too, JD, that it's the Holy Spirit that moves hearts.
Yeah.
It's not either of us. So if we lose an argument or can't come to a conclusion where the other person decides on the spot to convert, it's not our job to make that happen. Right? That's got to always be God that calls that person out into something new, right? And being able just to say, hey, here's the thing. I will present this to you. Here's what Catholics actually believe, in case you haven't heard it before. Take it or leave it. You can still hate us, like Fulton Sheen has said, right? But now at least you know what you hate. You know actually the truth, right, of what the people you hate believe versus what you thought we believed, right? Being able just to sit in that, I think, is really important, right? Not having to win that argument every time.
Yeah, I always think about how after St. Paul had encounter with Jesus, when Jesus appeared to him, he did not immediately come to an intellectual assent of believing who Jesus was or about what the Christian faith taught. Even though he had St. Peter and the apostles, he went on exile, spent 3 years, and he kind of took his time to come to that intellectual assent. So even when we are having conversations with our Protestant friends, we don't have to push it to the fact that they have to absolutely agree what we are saying immediately and tomorrow they have to be baptized as Catholics. We don't have to have that pressure when we are having a respectful argumentation with our friends.
Yeah. I think that's fantastic. Okay, I do want to tackle some of these common kind of misconceptions that you do such an amazing job with tackling every day. Do you have a number one? I know I can think of some, top 10 for sure, probably top 3 thing that you hear that is just constantly brought up to say, actually we believe this as Catholics, not that thing that you think we believe. Is there a number one for you that you hear the most?
So, the number one thing is I see a lot of Protestant pastors saying that it is God who sends people to hell. Like, they have this, formula. God is just, you are a sinner, and sin cannot enter heaven. So when you do not repent and accept Jesus as your savior, God condemns you to hell. So I think we, as Catholics, we would agree to most of it, except for the fact that it is God who condemns you to hell. But as Catholics, we believe it is not God who condemns us to hell, but it is through our free will, by persisting in mortal sin, rejecting God till the end, we condemn ourselves to eternal damnation. Even at that, the church does not say, if you do this, you will surely go to hell. Who goes to hell or heaven is the jurisdiction of God. So I feel, that kind of an argument really is propagating fear-based gospel rather than love-based gospel. If you do not do this, you will be sent to hell. So you have to do this. So it's like believing Jesus for not to get into hell. So that is one negative aspect of it. And the other thing is, as C.S. Lewis said, the doors of hell is shut on the inside. It is not God you sending it to you to hell and shutting the door, but you send yourself to, eternal damnation, and then you shut the door on God. So like the prodigal son, ran away from God and he wanted to live his own life. So I feel God sending you to hell is a very big misconception, and it is propagating a fear-based gospel by a lot of our, especially Pentecostal friends I see online. So that would be the first thing.
Yeah. I think similar to that, in kind of the same vein, is this idea that I certainly believed and wrestled with as an evangelical, is this once saved, always saved idea, right? That and I guess with that is the idea that Catholics, you can't have that assurity, right? Me as an evangelical, I can say a prayer and know that I'm saved, going to heaven when I die. You, JD, can't trust in that because you don't believe in that. Now, my problem with that, and this was part of my faith journey, was of course the question: well, what if I do bad things? Right? How can I say that prayer and then go off and do bad things and stop believing in God and go wander far from God? The retort was, well, then you weren't actually ever saved. You didn't mean that prayer, right? And then I go, well, okay, but how do I know if I meant that prayer or not? Like that begins to become as impossible at the same kind of level of difficulty it is for, say, the Catholic I was criticizing to know if they're saved, right? And then we're just in this weird spiral of, well, who really knows how well they're saved, right?
Yeah.
So,
our Protestant friends think that salvation is just a legal declaration. You just say these words: Jesus is your personal savior, I believe in him, and you're saved, and you're always saved. But they don't understand that salvation is an ongoing journey. You sanctify consistently your life, and then eventually you leave it into the hands of God. No human being can say with absolute certainty that they are fully saved or they are fully condemned. Who is saved, who is condemned is the jurisdiction of God. No, even the church does not say anything except the fact that canonized saints are in heaven. But who is in hell, the church does not make any declaration. So if the church cannot make the declaration, how can we as individual beings make that declaration? Is just very mind-boggling. Actually, what you said, Keith, the always saved, once saved, always saved, is the flip side of God sends you to hell. So I think these are two extreme positions in that context, is what I feel.
Yeah. I absolutely. You have some great videos, great kind of reels and commentary on Purgatory too, Rick. This is one of those things that, again, this kind of fits in the similar kind of genre. I guess we're doing the death and afterlife. This is the section, or I don't know, but that's again one of those things that I know I wrestled with. I read C.S. Lewis's Great Divorce and was like, wait a minute, this makes a lot of sense actually, because how can I? Okay, I'm saved as a Protestant, but I am not perfected. How can I, in a minute, die in a car accident? I had attachment to sin. I had lust and desires and things that weren't properly oriented towards Christ. I die in a car accident, JD. In the next moment, I'm face to face with Christ, and those things are gone. Like where did they go? And then the idea of purgatory began to make more sense to me, as an evangelical, because I'm like, I thought through just logically there had to be some way of those things going away and me being conformed to Christ. How? Right? And that is then a gateway to, well, hey guys, purgatory kind of makes a little bit of sense.
Yeah, because as Catholics, we believe that baptism takes away the eternal damnation because of the original sin that we are born with. But then we are given the grace to live a sanctified life. But it is kind of understood that through our life experience, not everybody lives that life of perfection and absolute sanctification. So when we die, there is some kind of imperfections, some kind of impurities that we have. So after our death, as you know, that sin cannot and nothing impure or sinful can enter heaven. So which means after our death, there should be something that happens in order to completely purify us that can, eventually take us to heaven. Actually, Protestants also agree that there is something that happens. They just don't want to name it as purgatory because the Catholic Church says so. I think it is just intellectual dishonesty there, because I was watching this debate between James White and Jimmy Akin. So James White agrees that is something that happens after death, and some kind of purification happens before you go to heaven. Then Jimmy Akin said, okay, so that is what we call purgatory. Then he immediately says, oh, no, God just takes us to heaven. So I feel that sometimes they just want to, disagree because the Catholic Church says so.
Yeah, it's a language thing sometimes too, right? It's a thing where we're using the same words to mean different things, or trying to say the same thing with different words that just aren't compatible, right? I've had lots of guests on the show. Matthew J. Thomas, who is a former evangelical who became Catholic through his research on the early church, talks about justification and the idea that about how Catholics and the overwhelming majority of non-Catholic Christians are saved. We believe the same things about that. We're just using different words.
Yeah.
Right. You talked about justification and sanctification, right? If you ask the evangelical on the street, like, okay, you're once saved, always saved, but then do you do nothing once you're saved? They go, oh, no. You live a Christian life and you read the Bible and go to church and you pray, right? So we believe the same things, that we're becoming more holy, more like Christ through our actions. We're not saved by doing those actions, but we believe the same thing about those actions being important. But you like you say, there's this knee-jerk reaction against things that sound Catholic. So we can't call those works because that sounds wrong. We don't believe that. Or we can't call it justification and sanctification. We can't call these things the same names, but we are often meaning the same things, despite using maybe different language or having that prejudice against things sounding too Catholic, right? I think you're totally right, JD.
Yeah, that's absolutely true, Keith. And the second major misconception or the Protestant teaching, which I find very difficult to accept, is some of them believe that God is in competition with us. Like a lot of Protestants believe, like, the extreme ones, especially the Pentecostals, believe that God is one being among many, which means God and human beings are in the same strata of existence. Of course, God is a higher being. So which means any glory given to God, if any glory given to man is a glory taken away from God, which is why they cannot accept any human collaboration with the works of God. That's why they have to say grace alone, faith alone, scripture alone. But we do not, as Catholics, believe that. What Catholics say is God is the very essence of being itself. We exist because of God. God is the creator and we are his creations, which is why as Catholics, we can boldly say the glory of God is a human being fully alive. So we don't have to play the zero-sum game of this only, that only, but rather we can boldly say grace and action, faith and action, grace and cooperation, scripture and tradition. So we embrace the both and tradition, but Protestants always want to say only this, only that. So I think they put themselves in a kind of a chamber which they can't get them out of.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. I noticed too what I describe as an allergy to idol worship too, right? It's a good thing, right? There's this kind of fence in Protestantism around anything that appears to in any way look like idol worship, right? I know there's some higher church Christians like Lutherans or Anglicans, right, will have more ornate kind of worship spaces and stuff, but in the evangelical sphere, like where I kind of grew up, all we had in the whole church, what we call the sanctuary, was the cross, but off to the side, because even that cross as a focal point, right, could begin to look like idol worship, and we avoided that like the plague, right? It was an allergy to idol worship. So there's a right impulse there, right? Because we want to, as Catholics, avoid worshiping idols, right? But that becomes this almost kind of fixation against anything that looks like even remotely like idol worship. And then, of course, as Catholics, right, we're kneeling sometimes before statues, we're asking for saints' intercession, we're doing all these kinds of things that begin to look to the evangelical eyes like we're worshiping idols. And that allergy kicks in. They're like, no, that can't possibly be Christian or right, because look, they're doing this, right? But again, like you just said about the Catholic mindset, that paradigm is much different. We're not taking from God by asking somebody
Yes.
to pray for
Good.
us, right? Can
Yeah,
we
that
unpack that a bit?
Yeah, so yesterday I did a video where a Protestant person has taken a clip of a priest gathering around Mother Mary's statue, and they are singing and they're lighting candles or whatever. So he says, see, Catholic priest are worshipping Mother Mary. They are singing, they are praying, they are kneeling, and they have a statue. So my response to that was, now singing, praying, and standing around a statue constitute worship. That's not the biblical understanding. So where is the sacrifice? Worship always involves sacrifice. So I feel this is a famous saying, right, which was recently come up in all social media platforms. It is not that Catholics worship Mother Mary, it is that Protestants venerate God, because we have a different understanding of both of them have a different understanding of what worship means. For Protestants, they think praying, singing, and kneeling down or clapping hands or bowing down is a form of worship. But Catholics don't believe that. We say Eucharist is the highest form of worship. So we just are, as you rightly said, we are just using different words to describe different things.
Yeah, that's so well said. You're absolutely right? Because what I'm thinking back to, and again, my journey at the earliest origin point began by looking at the Mass versus my evangelical worship service, right? We'd call it worship. What we meant by worship was singing songs to God, hearing a message preached, right? And then having communion kind of once a month. That was our Sunday worship service, right? Which, of course, like you say, involves no kind of sacrifice and looks nothing like biblical worship in the Old Testament, right? And in the New Testament, right? And in the early church, right? So, like you say, when I began to understand that and read the context of the early church and understand typography and understand typology, I should say, and the roots of kind of Catholic worship from the Old Testament to today, I kind of went, nothing in my evangelical service looks like this, right? What we called worship, was singing songs, right? That's veneration. That wasn't actually worship. That's a great way of putting that, JD. I think that's so important to underscore. It's not so much that they're seeing Catholics worshiping Mary or saints or statues. They themselves don't quite understand what worship is. That's brilliant. I love that.
And all these singing, clapping, praising, all can enrich the eventual worship that we have. That's why the Holy Mass is an excellent example of how Catholics worship God. I mean, we sing songs to Mother Mary, to the saints, but we don't consider that as worship. As you said, it is part of the honoring and venerating the good holy life that they have lived in this world. So again, coming to this point of God is not in competition with us. One of the reasons why Protestants are not able to accept the role that saints and Mother Mary play in our sanctifying process is because they see that if we give any honor and veneration to any human beings, then that is taking the glory away from God. So they're always playing that zero-sum game. Any glory given to man is a glory taken away from God. That I feel is a great misconception, which is why a lot of Protestants will never be able to accept the Catholic teaching until they embrace the both and perspective of the Catholic faith.
Yeah, that's so brilliant. I can remember years ago I had Marcus Gordai from the Journey Home on the show, and he said that the most devout Catholic will look to the Protestant eyes as like the biggest lapsed Christian ever, because that devout Catholic is kneeling by a statue, is praying the rosary, is maybe wearing a scapular, is reciting these rote prayers and burning candles and doing these things that to the Protestant eye looks like crazy idol worship and vain repeated prayers and all these things that evangelicals kind of rail against. Yet that Catholic in the Catholic paradigm is an incredibly devout, Catholic seeking after Christ. But from the outside, from that other paradigm, that Protestant lens, looking through that at the Catholic, you're seeing all these red flags, right? But like you say, it's a matter of perspective, of understanding that the difference in what we mean when we say worship, and true biblical worship looks different than what many evangelicals are doing, right? As kindly as I can say that.
And to say that God is worried about the honor and the veneration that we give to Mother Mary and the saints is like saying J.K. Rowling is worried about all the fame and the appreciation Harry Potter gets. I mean, J.K. Rowling would, if at all, she would be really joyful in the fact that one of her creation is getting all the fame and appreciation. She's not in competition with Harry Potter. She's the creator of Harry Potter. So any glory given to Harry Potter is a glory given to her, J.K. Rowling. So I think, yeah.
That's fantastic. I think the very first Harry Potter apologetic argument on the show ever. So congratulations. That's amazing. You do some great work tackling, and I love this. It's razor sharp logic that you employ, JD. I got to say, it's amazing to tackle some of those kind of underlying frameworks of Protestantism, like sola scriptura, right? Those kind of things. And you have countless videos that just go, you know what? Here's one thing here that doesn't quite work in sola scriptura. Or how is this explained? And I think, I love the idea that someone's going to watch those on the reels as they scroll by. And here's a question that a person maybe has never thought of before. And you kind of go, hey, think about this. And it's like, wow, wait a minute. You just totally crushed my world, JD. You just totally asked me a question I hadn't thought of before. And that begins to poke a hole in that paradigm, right? So some approaches to how you begin to ask those questions. What are some, thinking of sola scriptura, what are some questions that you go, hey, here's a thought, this doesn't make quite sense. This doesn't quite make sense. Where do you go with that?
Yeah. So I saw this, secular Instagrammer, a guy who does a lot of politics in America. So he would, just go to a restaurant, have food, and he would ask these most obvious questions about what is happening in the culture and in the world of politics. And it would just be so, it would defy the way the culture has understood certain things, and it just defies logic. Simple question, but it makes you think. So I, wanted to do the same thing in the Catholic Protestant debate. So I would, put forward an assertion made by Protestants and make a counter assertion which is illogical. So, we can have a conversation about it. So that's how I started asking these questions, because most of the time I feel as Catholics, we are playing defense. Protestants throwing questions. Why does the Catholic Church does this? Why does the Catholic Church teach that? But we never ask our Protestant friends to, explain what they believe in. Like, for example, one guy asked me, how do you know the Catholic Church is the one true church? So instead of answering him that question, I asked him, okay, I don't know whether the Catholic Church is true or not. So you seem to be so confident. How do you know the church that you're going to is the one true church? If it's not the true church, why are you going to that church? So I feel sometimes asking questions also can help understand the inconsistency and the illogical assertions that our Protestant friends make. And I'm picking up all these knowledge from some of the great people who do apologetic work. So I'm not taking any credit for the logical understanding that I have. I've learned it from them. I'm just reproducing it in these Instagram reels.
Yeah. And asking questions is a huge way of, I've learned this too, JD, of getting to the root of what's actually being asked here, right? And and for me, my part of my story again was a Protestant pastor who asked me, what's more important, the Bible or tradition? And that was a question I'd never thought of before, right? He was on his own journey. He was a lapsed Catholic who still an evangelical pastor to this day. I still pray for him and fast for him daily. And a bunch of us who know him now and have converted thanks to his journey, right? He remained Protestant. We all became Catholic. We all pray for him, right? Interesting guy. But that one question, right? Really led me on this whole journey. And so I've seen firsthand the value of just asking those simple questions, right? Asking a question like sola scriptura. Okay, well, where is that in the Bible? That's a very simple question, but then that requires somebody to kind of have to begin to, okay, well, yeah, where is that, right? How do you know the Bible is infallible? Where does it tell you that? Oh, okay, well, where do I learn that, right? Those kind of questions, I think, are so valuable in beginning to ask, getting that thought process going, right?
Yeah, asking questions is a wonderful way of getting to the root of the problem. Sometimes, as you rightly said, we might be believing the same thing, but we are just using different vocabulary and different words to express what we believe in a different way. So we might think that we are disagreeing, but we might actually agree on what we believe.
Yeah,
as Catholic and Protestants.
Absolutely. And you feature a lot of former Catholics in your videos too, right? You clip out these things that, and again, this is the very first Catholics I encountered in my journey were these former Catholics who told me all these kind of things they believed as Catholics and how wrong they were and how backward they were. And now I'm Protestant and I'm free of those things, right? You found those same people on the internet, right? And you very deftly, very cordially, very kindly kind of go, actually, I don't actually believe these things, right? I think that's a great way of, because we all know these people who say these things, right? So being able to watch and hear you with that counterpoint right away, right? It is so valuable, right? It's the little like actual Catholic on the shoulder. Yeah, actually, we don't believe that. Like, here's what we actually believe, right?
Yeah, I think Thomas Aquinas, one of the saints, said that helping someone really ascend intellectually to the truth is in itself a work of charity, because it's a great act of love for someone to help someone understand the fullness of the truth, and through that their life is set free. So in fact, I need to work a little bit on how I express some of the Catholic positions with great love and charity. Sometimes I might come off rude. I'm working on that with my spiritual director. I send all the videos that I do, so he said it could be more loving, more charitable in this way. So I'm working on that, but I'm saying the whole act that we are trying to explain the fullness of the faith is in itself an act of love and charity, and I want to do it as much as possible to our friends who have left the Catholic faith and now have embraced any form of Protestantism.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay, I want to ask you one more question, and maybe it's this: like, thinking of the people who are the audience for this show, listening to this podcast, watching these videos, who are that person who's looking into the Catholic faith, who has some hang-ups, who isn't quite there yet, who's thinking, Catholics look compelling, but they believe this, and this. I'm not quite there yet. That seems foreign to me. What would you say to a person who's there, who's kind of curious, looking in, but has these hang-ups still? Do you have advice for how that person can proceed? Like, what should they be thinking of, or praying about, or doing to kind of take that next step?
I would tell them, come and see. Like when the disciples of St. John the Baptist went and asked Jesus, are you the Messiah? Jesus did not make an intellectual set of arguments saying why I am the Messiah. He just told the disciples, come and see. So sometimes, no matter how much strong your intellectual search is, sometimes just coming and seeing the mass, just seeing the statues or the wonderful paintings and architecture and the way the church is built, that can also ascend you towards the fullness of the truth. So if they are really struggling and they are stuck in a point where they can't move forward because of certain intellectual blocks they have about a Marian dogma or about the real presence of the Eucharist, I would tell them, do that, but just come and see the beauty of the Catholic faith.
That's fantastic. I love that. JD, this has been an awesome conversation. You have a great journey, a great charism, a great passion for your mission. I love it. You're very fun to talk to, and hopefully listeners will agree. I will of course put links to your stuff. I mean, people are gonna know your stuff. Like, they don't need me to put links to it, but I will put links to your stuff.
Thank you.
In the show notes for the podcast, for the YouTube channel. Where do you want to point them towards, though? Like, what's the thing you're passionate about that you want them to come and see and come and see and check out? Where can they go to find your stuff?
So I do most of my work in YouTube. That is JD Catholic Engage. That's the YouTube channel, and of course the same account for Instagram. I really enjoy, as you said, the one-word questions that I ask our Protestant friends in terms of their understanding and their misconceptions about the Catholic faith. So I really would love for them to come and see, even if they don't have much time to go through an entire commentary on what the Purgatory is or what transubstantiation is. I just think this 1 minute or 30-second video will at least, give them that curiosity or the urge to know more about the faith, Catholic faith.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'll link to those stuff. It's awesome content. I love what you're doing there. I love that you are focusing on being charitable. This is the Cordial Catholic. It's an aspirational title, so I intentionally named it that so that I would have to aspire to that goal. So yes. I hear you. It's great and so important in the space to be charitable and be kind and loving. Right. That's what's going to attract people to not that winning the argument. I love that, JD.
I totally agree.
Listen, thanks for being here. This is a real pleasure.
Keith. It was an amazing conversation.
Thank you. I want to say God bless you and the work you're doing for the church, JD. Pray for us. We're praying for you. And thanks for being here. This has been great.
Yeah.